Elon Musk walked into the courtroom with the confidence that had taken him to the top of the tech world. Tesla. SpaceX. The Boring Company. He had conquered all of them, and he was used to being the one in control. Nothing seemed impossible when he set his mind to it. But today was different. Today, he was about to face a challenge that might just be his greatest yet, a battle not in a boardroom, but in a courtroom. And across from him stood a woman who had earned a reputation for breaking even the toughest of minds, Judge Victoria Harris. The moment Musk entered the room, a hush fell over the court. His presence was commanding, his every step calculated. He didn't flinch under the weight of the stairs, nor did he glance at the people seated in the audience. His mind was already focused on one thing, winning. Yet, as his eyes flickered toward the judge's bench, a wave of uncertainty struck him. Judge Harris sat poised in her seat, her expression unreadable, her eyes focused on the file in front of her. Her reputation for no-nonsense rulings had earned her the nickname, the Iron Lady, of the legal world, and Musk knew this was no ordinary judge. She had been at the helm of some of the highest-profile cases in the country. Today, she was the one standing between him and his future. "Mr. Musk," she said in a voice that rang with authority, "I hope you're prepared for what lies ahead." Elon took his seat, his mind racing. He'd been in high-pressure situations before, facing down regulatory boards, negotiating with world leaders, even launching rockets into space. But this felt different. This wasn't a challenge that could be solved with technology or innovation. This was a battle of wills. And in this battle, the rules were more elusive than a code he could crack. His legal team had briefed him thoroughly, ensuring that they had every angle covered. But now, sitting in that room, with the weight of his empire hanging in the balance, the reality was sinking in. This wasn't just about business. This was personal. A case had been brought against him, accusing his companies of unethical practices, and the consequences could be disastrous. He looked back at Judge Harris, who was now surveying him over the top of her glasses. Her piercing gaze made him feel like she was already reading him like a book. And she wasn't wrong. Harris had studied him. She had followed his rise to fame, had seen his brash tweets, and his unfiltered opinions on almost everything. She had watched his relentless pursuit of progress, and for all her admiration of his accomplishments, she couldn't ignore the chaos he often left in his wake. "Musk," she said again, her voice softer now, but still firm, "I trust you understand the severity of this situation." For a moment, Musk hesitated. The room was silent, and all eyes were on him. This was it. The challenge he had feared, the one he had never seen coming. It wasn't about his companies, not really. It wasn't even about the legal case. It was about his ability to face an adversary who wasn't swayed by his money or fame. This was about his ability to win, not just in the courtroom, but in the fight for his own integrity. "Yes, Your Honor," Musk replied, his voice steady. "I understand." Judge Harris nodded once, as though satisfied with his response. But Musk could see the glint of something else in her eyes. This wasn't a judge who would let him off easy. She wasn't afraid to take him down if it meant upholding the law. And Musk, for all his success and genius, wasn't used to being in a position of vulnerability. The case against him had escalated quickly. A group of former employees had accused Musk's companies of misleading investors, engaging in questionable practices, and even ignoring safety concerns. The accusations had been building for months, but now they were official. The legal battle was set to begin, and Judge Harris was the one to preside over it. As Musk sat there, contemplating the battle ahead, his mind wandered briefly to his past. He had faced numerous obstacles in his life, growing up in South Africa, dealing with countless failures, and constantly having to prove himself to a world that doubted him. But now, for the first time, Musk wondered if this was a battle he might not be able to win. His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his thoughts. He pulled it out discreetly and glanced at the screen, a text from one of his closest advisors. "We're ready. You can win this," just stay focused. It was a message of reassurance, but for the first time, Elon wasn't sure if he believed it. He had always been able to outthink his competitors, to stay one step ahead. But this time, with Judge Harris in control, he wasn't so sure. The court session officially began, and the arguments started flying back and forth. Musk's legal team launched their first salvo, presenting their case with confidence. They spoke of the accusations being exaggerated, of the media's bias against Musk, and of the intricacies of corporate law that made the claims seem baseless. Musk sat there, his expression impassive, as the battle played out around him. But Judge Harris wasn't buying it. Every time Musk's team made a point, she shot it down with precision. She didn't just question their facts, she challenged their motives. She knew the game they were playing, and she wasn't having it. It wasn't long before Musk realized that this was not going to be an easy win. The judge's piercing questions, her steely demeanor, were unlike anything he had ever encountered before. He had fought against governments, corporations, and public opinion. But this? This was different. This was a fight he didn't control. And for the first time in years, he felt himself losing his grip. By the end of the day, Musk found himself walking out of the courtroom, his legal team surrounding him with a mix of tension and determination. But Musk was lost in thought. Judge Harris had proven herself as a force to be reckoned with. And as much as he hated to admit it, he knew this battle wouldn't be won with his usual tactics. As he stepped into his car, he finally allowed himself to process what had just happened. This wasn't just about legal strategy or corporate warfare. This was about something deeper. This was about his own legacy, his future, and whether he could rise to meet an adversary who wasn't intimidated by him. He stared out of the window as the city blurred past, wondering what would come next. One thing was clear, this was just the beginning. The real battle had yet to unfold. And Elon Musk was ready to face it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? While Elon Musk sat silently, pondering the battle that lay ahead, the courtroom's attention was fixed on the woman presiding over it. Judge Victoria Harris. She was a formidable presence, a judge whose reputation had reached the far corners of the legal world. A woman whose name alone made even the most hardened attorneys pause before entering her courtroom. But there was far more to her than her title. Victoria Harris wasn't just a judge, she was a force of nature. Born into a working-class family in Chicago, Harris had fought tooth and nail to get to where she was. Raised in a modest neighborhood, her mother worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet while her father, a mechanic, taught her the value of hard work. They weren't wealthy, but they were proud. Victoria had always believed that the world owed her nothing and that success would come only if she earned it. Her journey to the bench had been far from easy. After graduating from law school, she worked as a public defender, taking on cases that other attorneys avoided. She saw firsthand the injustices faced by those without the means to hire high-priced lawyers. It was here that her sense of justice truly formed, a belief that the law should be impartial, no matter the wealth, power, or status of those involved. But as much as she wanted to fight for those who couldn't afford representation, the demands of the profession led her to a different path. Harris moved to the private sector, where she eventually worked her way into the heart of corporate law, handling high-stakes cases for clients with deep pockets. It was here that she learned how the system was rigged in favor of the powerful, and it only fueled her desire to one day be in a position where she could be the one to challenge the establishment. It wasn't long before her skills caught the attention of those in charge of judicial appointments. At the age of 40, Harris became one of the youngest judges to ever sit on a federal bench. Her rise had been meteoric, but it wasn't without sacrifice. Her personal life had always taken a back seat to her career. Harris had never been married, had no children, and often found herself eating dinner alone in her office, going over legal documents long after others had gone home. Relationships had been difficult, not because of a lack of desire, but because of her intense focus on justice. She wasn't a woman to be trifled with, and her single-mindedness had made it impossible to juggle both a career and a personal life. But now, as she sat behind her bench in this high-profile case, Harris couldn't help but wonder if the sacrifices she'd made over the years had been worth it. As much as she hated to admit it, she sometimes felt the weight of loneliness, an emptiness that came from always fighting for others but rarely taking the time to fight for herself. There was no turning back, though. She was in the midst of a battle now, and it wasn't just a legal one, it was personal. When the case involving Elon Musk had first landed on her desk, she had felt an unexpected stir of curiosity. Musk was a figure who had always intrigued her. His drive, his ambition, his willingness to risk everything for the sake of innovation, there was no denying his genius. But with that genius came a history of controversial decisions, public outbursts, and questionable behavior. To Harris, Musk represented everything that was wrong with the system. A billionaire who could bend the rules, manipulate public opinion, and yet escape the consequences of his actions. And now, he was sitting in her courtroom, accused of abusing his power. The stakes were high. This case wasn't just about money or corporate ethics, it was about the idea of power itself. But Harris had a job to do. And that job was to uphold the law, no matter who stood before her. She couldn't afford to be swayed by Musk's wealth or his reputation. To do so would be a betrayal of everything she had worked for. Still, even as she prepared for the battle ahead, Harris couldn't help but wonder what had brought Musk to this point. What drove him? What had he sacrificed to get to the place where he felt invincible? Harris could tell that Musk was different from the other high-profile figures she had encountered. There was a certain desperation in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that suggested he wasn't as confident as he appeared. This wasn't a man who had everything figured out, this was a man in turmoil. As she sat at her desk, reviewing the details of the case, Harris reflected on how much her own life had mirrored the path Musk had taken. She, too, had risen to power through sheer determination, often at the expense of personal happiness. She had learned to mask her emotions, to bury her doubts, and to keep pushing forward no matter the cost. But now, facing Elon Musk, she realized that their lives had crossed in a way that neither of them had expected. This wasn't just another case. This was a battle between two forces, two people who had climbed their respective mountains, only to meet at the summit, where the view was anything but clear. Harris's mind shifted back to the task at hand. She would not let her personal feelings cloud her judgment. She would make sure that justice was served, no matter the cost. As the days passed and the case unfolded, Harris found herself more and more intrigued by Musk's behavior. There were moments where she caught glimpses of the man behind the billionaire persona, the man who had fought to create something bigger than himself. There was a vulnerability there, an openness she hadn't expected. She couldn't help but wonder, was there more to Musk than the public image he projected? But for now, she pushed those thoughts aside. The case wasn't about understanding Musk. It was about ensuring that the law was upheld. And as the proceedings continued, Harris remained steadfast in her role as an impartial judge, determined to ensure that Musk faced the consequences of his actions, just like anyone else. Still, deep down, a part of her wondered if there was more to this fight than either of them could see. As she looked across the courtroom at Musk, who was sitting silently with his legal team, she couldn't shake the feeling that this battle would change them both in ways they never expected. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial continued, and the conflict between Elon Musk and Judge Victoria Harris grew more intense with each passing day. Every move, every word exchanged, seemed to have weight. Musk's legal team worked tirelessly, attempting to push back against the claims made by the plaintiffs, while Judge Harris maintained a steady and unwavering control over the proceedings. Elon sat at the defendant's table, feeling a wave of frustration building within him. He was used to being the one calling the shots. In the world of tech, he had made a name for himself by pushing boundaries, often disregarding the rules in favor of progress. He had a vision for the future, and that vision had earned him billions. Yet here, in this room, he wasn't the one in charge. And that made him uncomfortable. Musk's legal team was aggressive in their defense, but each time they made their arguments, Judge Harris would shoot them down with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. She had a way of peeling apart every argument they presented, challenging them to prove the merit of their claims, and, more importantly, their evidence. It was clear that she wasn't going to be swayed by his fame or fortune. The law was her only guide, and she would follow it to the letter. In one particularly tense moment, Musk's lead attorney, Gregory Phillips, stood to present the defense's argument. His voice was measured, but there was an underlying sense of urgency. "Your Honor," Phillips began, "we're dealing with a case based on assumptions and speculation. The plaintiffs are claiming misconduct, but there is no concrete evidence to support such an accusation. Tesla's operations have always followed industry standards. Musk has worked relentlessly to build an innovative company that has contributed to the global economy." Judge Harris raised her hand, signaling for Phillips to pause. Her expression was unreadable, but her gaze remained sharp as she addressed him. "Mr. Phillips, I understand your argument, but you cannot simply dismiss these accusations as baseless. You are asking me to ignore a pattern of behavior that has been reported, and that has led to significant consequences for the plaintiffs involved. If there is no wrongdoing, then why are we here?" Her voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it that made Phillips hesitate. Musk watched as his attorney tried to regroup, but it was clear the tide was turning. Judge Harris was not one to back down. Every point they made was met with a counterpoint, and with each rebuttal, the pressure on Musk grew. The room felt stifling, the air thick with tension as everyone waited for Musk to speak. It had become clear, this was not just a legal battle. This was a battle of endurance. A battle for control. Musk had always thrived on pushing through the toughest obstacles, but this case was unlike anything he had encountered before. It was a fight where logic, facts, and the law itself were the weapons being wielded against him. And with Judge Harris at the helm, he had come to realize that he wasn't dealing with just any judge. She was a formidable adversary, one who had a clear vision of justice and wasn't afraid to challenge the powers that be. As the trial continued, the sense of rising tension seemed to permeate the room. It wasn't just the legal arguments that were building, there was something else. An undercurrent of anticipation, a feeling that something was about to break. Musk's thoughts wandered briefly to the people he had left behind in his quest for success. The family members who had been by his side through thick and thin. The friends who had offered support, only to watch him become consumed by his ambition. He had always felt like the outsider, the one who had to prove himself in a world that didn't always understand him. And now, sitting in this courtroom, he realized that he was once again fighting for something more than just his company's. He was fighting for his own reputation, his legacy. But it wasn't just about him anymore. The stakes had grown much higher. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Musk turned to his legal team. His eyes met Phillips's with a certain intensity, as if searching for reassurance. Phillips nodded slightly, acknowledging Musk's silent question, but the doubt in his eyes mirrored what Musk was feeling, uncertainty. They were no longer just fighting a case. They were fighting an uphill battle. That evening, as Musk retreated to his private office, the weight of the day's events bore down on him. He looked out the window of his high-rise office, the bright lights of the city below reminding him of all he had achieved. But despite the view, he couldn't shake the feeling of being cornered. For the first time in a long time, he felt as though he was on the defense. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his trusted advisor. "Don't let her rattle you. You've overcome bigger challenges. Stick to the facts. You can win this." It was the kind of message Musk had seen countless times, a simple reminder of his capabilities. But this time, it didn't feel like enough. He had been up against bigger corporations, bigger hurdles, but never had he faced an adversary like Judge Harris. The case against him had begun to take on a life of its own, and Musk knew that it was no longer just about winning. It was about making sure that the truth, his truth, was heard. Musk leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen in front of him. A file on the case was open, but his mind wasn't on the details. Instead, he thought about the woman across the courtroom, the judge who was methodically dismantling every piece of his defense. Judge Harris was relentless. And for the first time, Musk felt the undeniable force of her presence in a way that went beyond her rulings. This was a woman who knew how to push people to their limits. And as much as he hated it, Musk realized that to beat her, he would have to confront not just the case, but everything he had built, and everything he stood for. The clock ticked on, and the pressure mounted. As Musk prepared for another day of grueling arguments, a question lingered in his mind: was he truly ready for this fight? The days stretched on, and the courtroom became a battlefield where every word carried the weight of fate. Elon Musk's confidence had slowly been chipped away as Judge Victoria Harris grew more assertive, and the pressure was mounting. What began as a legal skirmish had evolved into an all-out war, not just for Musk's fortune and reputation but for his very sense of self. Musk wasn't used to being in a defensive position. His mind, normally sharp and relentless, was clouded by a growing sense of vulnerability. He had always prided himself on having the answers, on taking control of every situation. But here, in this room, surrounded by legal jargon and unyielding scrutiny, his usual tactics seemed ineffective. He had underestimated the strength of Harris's resolve, her ability to pick apart every argument with precision. His legal team, still confident in their strategy, had grown more tense, as though they, too, could sense the shifting tides. Gregory Phillips, his lead attorney, called for a private meeting in Musk's office, desperate to realign their strategy. "Elon, we need to rethink our approach," Phillips said, leaning forward in the plush chair across from Musk's desk. His face was drawn, his voice low. "Judge Harris has us on the ropes. We can't just keep throwing out defenses and hoping one of them sticks. She's not backing down, and if we don't adjust, we'll lose." Musk, his fingers steepled in thought, nodded slowly. "I know. It's like she's not even hearing us. She's just waiting for us to make a mistake." Phillips took a deep breath. "You've built empires by seeing things no one else sees. We need to do that here. We can't fight her with conventional tactics. We need to think outside the box, something that shows her we're not just here to defend, we're here to win." Musk's gaze darkened as his mind whirred, processing the words. The truth was, he didn't just want to win. He needed to. This case had become a personal test, a battle for his identity, and a fight against the very system he had spent years challenging. Musk had never backed down from a challenge, but this was different. This was the kind of battle where the consequences weren't just financial, they were personal. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the skyline outside. The city shimmered in the fading light of the evening, its energy mirroring the turmoil he was feeling inside. What if this wasn't just about the case? What if this trial, this confrontation with Judge Harris, was something deeper, something that went beyond the corporate world he was used to navigating? For the first time in a long time, Musk wondered if the very nature of his success, his drive, his ambition, his willingness to bend the rules, had led him to this point. Was he paying the price for his own vision of the future? As Musk grappled with the enormity of the situation, he found himself drawn into thoughts about the past. His early days at Tesla and SpaceX had been full of challenges, but there was always a clear goal. Even when it seemed like the world was against him, Musk could focus on one thing, the vision. But now, it wasn't just the world he had to face, it was a woman who was determined to see him held accountable. Phillips cleared his throat, bringing Musk back to the present. "Elon, what's going on in your head? You're not yourself." Musk turned his chair to face his attorney. "I've been thinking," he said slowly, "maybe it's time I stop running. Maybe it's time I stop thinking about this as a fight I need to win and start thinking about it as a fight I need to learn from." Phillips blinked, surprised by the shift in Musk's tone. "Are you saying you're going to back down?" "No," Musk said firmly. I'm saying I need to understand why this matters so much. It's not just about proving something to Harris. It's about proving something to myself. There's more at stake here than I realized. I've been so focused on what I want, I've forgotten that the road I've chosen has consequences. And maybe it's time to confront those consequences head-on. The air in the room shifted as Musk spoke. For the first time, he seemed less like the ruthless businessman and more like a man who was beginning to understand the weight of his actions. It was a side of Musk that few had ever seen, the vulnerable, introspective part of him that had always been buried beneath the relentless pursuit of success. As the days passed, Musk's approach to the case began to evolve. He no longer relied solely on his legal team to craft a defense, he started asking deeper questions about the case itself. What had gone wrong? Where had he missed the mark? Was he truly the villain in this story, or had he simply become a symbol of everything the world hated about the powerful? Judge Harris, meanwhile, had no such doubts. She continued to preside over the case with her characteristic poise, never once wavering in her belief that the law was the ultimate guide. She didn't care about Musk's empire, his billions, or his fame. She cared about one thing, the truth. And as each new piece of evidence was presented, Harris's determination to uncover it only grew stronger. But Musk wasn't the only one feeling the heat. Harris, too, was experiencing an unexpected internal struggle. As much as she wanted to be impartial, she couldn't help but feel a certain respect for Musk's brilliance. There was something magnetic about him, a raw energy that had built one of the world's most powerful companies. For a moment, she questioned her own approach. Could it be that she was too focused on the rules, too rigid in her pursuit of justice? It was a fleeting thought, one she quickly pushed aside, but it lingered just long enough to make her question everything. Was there room in the law for compassion? For understanding? Or was the system truly as black and white as she had always believed? The tension between them was undeniable. Two people, both brilliant in their own right, were locked in a battle for dominance, one driven by the weight of their personal histories, the other by the stakes of a legal case that would decide their futures. As the next day in court loomed, Musk knew that something had shifted within him. He had reached a crossroads, and now he needed to choose which path he would take. Would he continue down the road of defiance, fighting tooth and nail to protect his empire? Or would he embrace the possibility that there was more to his journey than simply winning? Judge Harris, for her part, would have no choice but to follow the law wherever it led, no matter how tangled the road became. And so, the journey continued, each side pushing forward, each side facing their own doubts, until the truth would eventually be revealed. The courtroom was more charged than ever, as the trial reached its breaking point. The tension was palpable, and the air felt thick, as if a storm were brewing. Elon Musk sat at the defendant's table, his eyes narrowed, fingers tapping rhythmically on the surface. It had become clear that the battle wasn't just about the case anymore. It was personal. Both Musk and Judge Victoria Harris were standing at the precipice of something bigger than the legal world they inhabited. Musk had spent the past few days mulling over the implications of his actions, the consequences of his relentless ambition. He had started to see things differently. It wasn't just about defending himself, his companies, or his wealth anymore. It was about his character, the legacy he would leave behind, and the kind of person he wanted to be. The idea of being reduced to a villain in the eyes of the public was something Musk couldn't ignore, despite his usual indifference to public perception. He had worked so hard to build a future that was grounded in innovation, yet here he was, fighting to prove that he wasn't the monster others were painting him to be. Judge Harris, too, had been wrestling with her own feelings. Each ruling she made, each piece of evidence she evaluated, was laced with a quiet, growing sense of doubt. She was supposed to be impartial, the person who upheld the law without emotion or bias. Yet, there was something about Musk, something undeniable, that made her question whether this case was really as simple as it appeared. She could see the vulnerability beneath his calculated exterior, and part of her wanted to believe in him. But her role as a judge demanded that she put aside her emotions and focus on the facts. And yet, every day that passed in the trial made that increasingly difficult. As the trial continued, a bombshell moment came when Musk was called to the stand. He had been reluctant, but his attorneys insisted that it was the only way to swing the momentum in their favor. Musk's posture was stiff as he took the stand, but there was something different about him this time. He wasn't the cold, calculating mogul he had once been. There was a sense of raw honesty in his eyes, a vulnerability that had never been exposed to the public. His words were measured, but the emotion behind them was unmistakable. "Your Honor," Musk began, his voice steady but tinged with something deeper. "I know what you're trying to prove. I know that you think I've done something wrong, and maybe I have. But you need to understand something. Everything I've done with the belief that it was for the greater good. For the future. For humanity." The courtroom was silent as Musk's words hung in the air. For the first time, it seemed as though he was being completely transparent, unfiltered. It was a side of him that few had ever seen, and even fewer had ever expected. "I know that I've made mistakes. That I've taken risks, sometimes recklessly. But that's what it takes to change the world. You can't make progress without stepping on a few toes, without ruffling a few feathers. And I've done that. But I've always believed that I could make things better. That I could leave a lasting impact. I don't regret that." Judge Harris watched him carefully. There was a flicker in her expression, something that seemed to mirror the internal battle she had been grappling with. She had heard the testimonies, seen the evidence, and yet, in this moment, something about Musk's vulnerability struck a chord. The man before her wasn't a faceless billionaire, he was a human being, a person who had, in his own way, believed in the things he was trying to build. Whether or not that belief justified his actions was a question she would need to answer. As Musk continued, his words grew more impassioned. "I built Tesla and SpaceX because I wanted to show people what was possible. I wanted to change the way we look at energy, at space exploration, at the future of this planet. I wasn't thinking about profits. I was thinking about a legacy. I was thinking about something that could inspire future generations." Judge Harris was taken aback. She had heard countless defendants attempt to justify their actions in court, but there was something different about Musk. It wasn't the usual corporate jargon or self-serving rhetoric. There was sincerity in his voice. And for the first time, she could see that this wasn't just about a company or a court case. It was about something far more personal. The room was still as Musk's testimony continued. His voice had gained strength, each word carrying the weight of years of ambition, failure, and growth. And then, in an unexpected twist, Musk's face softened. He looked at Judge Harris, his eyes sincere, but his voice quieter now. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for sympathy. But I am asking you to understand that everything I've done for something bigger than myself. And that, in the end, has to count for something." There was a brief moment of silence, and then, for the first time since the trial began, Judge Harris spoke, her voice steady but calm. "Mr. Musk, your words have been heard. But you must understand, actions speak louder than words. And the consequences of those actions are why we are here." Musk nodded slowly, his jaw set. He knew that his emotional appeal wouldn't be enough to sway the judge's decision. The law was the law, and Harris was nothing if not relentless in her pursuit of justice. But what Musk didn't expect was the tiny shift that occurred in that moment, a glimmer of understanding between them, something that hinted at the possibility of a new beginning, a chance for change. The emotional climax of this trial had taken its toll on both Musk and Harris. For Musk, it was a sobering realization that his journey had been shaped by far more than just ambition. It had been shaped by a desire for redemption, for leaving behind something meaningful. For Harris, it was a moment of reckoning, as she found herself questioning not just the case before her but her own role in the system she had so long adhered to. As the day came to a close, the air in the courtroom was thick with unresolved tension. Musk had revealed a side of himself that few had ever seen, and Harris was left to reflect on what that meant for her judgment. Both were now at a crossroads, unsure of where the journey would take them next. But one thing was certain, the emotional stakes had never been higher. The days following Elon Musk's emotional testimony were filled with uncertainty, not just for him, but for everyone involved in the case. The courtroom, once a place of cold legal battle, now seemed to hold a different energy, a palpable weight, as though the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Judge Victoria Harris, ever composed, had withdrawn into herself after the emotional clash between herself and Musk. She spent hours alone in her chambers, poring over the case materials, replaying Musk's words in her mind. The truth was, she had always prided herself on her unwavering commitment to the law. She was a judge because she believed in justice, because she believed the law could provide a clear path forward. But after what she had seen from Musk, after hearing the sincerity in his voice, it was no longer so easy to separate the man from the case. Harris knew that in her heart, she wasn't just judging Musk as a businessman or a corporate giant. She was judging a man who had poured his soul into his work, who had risked everything to change the world in ways that most people could not even fathom. His testimony had stirred something in her that she hadn't expected. The law, the black and white rules she had so firmly adhered to, now felt a little more gray, a little more human. But as a judge, she knew that emotions could not cloud her judgment. She had to weigh everything, the facts, the law, and the consequences of her decisions. She wasn't just making a ruling for one person, she was making a ruling that would send a message to the world about accountability and power. Meanwhile, Musk found himself at a similar crossroads. After his emotional outpouring in the courtroom, he had been flooded with a mix of fear and clarity. For the first time, he understood the full weight of what he was up against. It wasn't just the legal charges. It was his legacy, his reputation, and the values that had driven him all these years. Could he reconcile his drive for innovation with the need for accountability? Could he continue to forge ahead with the same boldness, or would he have to reevaluate his approach, both in the courtroom and in his businesses? Musk spent long hours with his legal team, reviewing every strategy, every argument, every piece of evidence. But deep down, he knew that none of it mattered unless he could find peace within himself. Winning the case would be meaningless if it cost him the chance to change, for the better. The pressure was immense, and it wasn't just from the media or the courtroom. It was the internal pressure that weighed most heavily on him. Was he truly the man he wanted to be, or had he lost sight of something essential in his relentless pursuit of progress? As the trial moved toward its final stages, Musk sat in the courtroom one last time, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over him. The battle had been brutal, the stakes higher than he had ever anticipated. But now, it wasn't just about the legal outcome. It was about who he had become throughout this process, and whether or not he could live with that man. Judge Harris entered the courtroom, and the murmur of the crowd hushed immediately. Her presence was commanding, and yet, in that moment, there was something softer in her expression, something that hinted at the internal struggle she had been facing since Musk's testimony. The proceedings began, and after a few hours of legal arguments, Harris called for a brief recess. As the lawyers shuffled out of the room, she turned to Musk, her gaze steady and measured. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "I've had a lot of time to think about this case. To think about everything you've said." Musk met her eyes, his expression unreadable, though a part of him dreaded hearing her judgment. "I've come to realize something," Harris continued, her voice unwavering, though there was an undertone of vulnerability that wasn't usually there. "I've spent my entire career believing that the law was absolute. That there was no room for interpretation. But I've learned something in this trial, something about the complexities of human nature. About how one's motivations and intentions matter, even when the facts are clear." Musk's heart beat faster, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "Justice," Harris said slowly, "isn't just about upholding the law. It's about understanding the whole picture. It's about balancing accountability with the need for growth and redemption. I've seen in you a person who is capable of great things, but also someone who is grappling with the consequences of those actions. And that's why I've come to my decision." Musk felt his breath catch in his throat. The moment of truth had arrived, and he wasn't sure if he was prepared for whatever was coming next. "Mr. Musk," Judge Harris said, locking eyes with him, "you are found guilty on the charges of misconduct. However, the court acknowledges the extraordinary potential you've demonstrated in your work. I am issuing a sentence that will allow for the preservation of your legacy while ensuring you are held accountable for your actions. You will be required to pay restitution to those harmed by your decisions, but there will be no further imprisonment or further penalties beyond what has already been imposed." A wave of mixed emotions washed over Musk. It wasn't a total victory, but it wasn't a total defeat either. The weight of his actions had been acknowledged, but his future remained intact. He would face the consequences, but there was still room for redemption. Harris's voice softened as she spoke one last time. "Elon Musk, I hope you take this as an opportunity for reflection. What you do with the rest of your life will define you far more than the mistakes of your past." Musk didn't speak for a long moment, his mind racing, his emotions in turmoil. But as he looked at the judge, this woman who had challenged him, who had pushed him to examine himself in ways he had never imagined, he knew one thing for certain. His journey was far from over. He stood up, his voice steady but full of a quiet resolve. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'll take this seriously. And I won't let this define me. I'll use it to do better." The courtroom was silent as Musk walked out, the weight of his fate on his shoulders. But as he stepped out into the sunlight, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, both within him and in the world around him. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was his to walk. The days following the trial were quiet, almost eerily so. Elon Musk had been granted a reprieve, a second chance, but with it came the heavy weight of the decisions he now had to make. The media had exploded with coverage of the verdict. The headlines screamed about the surprising decision, and pundits debated whether it was justice served or just another loophole for the rich and powerful. But Musk wasn't paying much attention to the noise anymore. The real challenge, he knew, was in how he would rebuild, not just his companies, but himself. Elon had always been driven, perhaps to an unhealthy extent. But now, he was forced to pause and reflect on everything he had worked for. The stakes were higher than ever. Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink were his legacies, his life's work. But the question lingered, had he sacrificed too much to get here? How much of his humanity had been lost in the pursuit of something bigger than himself? The calm after the storm gave Musk a lot of time to think, time he had rarely allowed himself. He retreated to a private space in his home, away from the media and the relentless demands of his companies. He needed to clear his head, to find the clarity he had lost somewhere along the way. He sat by the window, looking out over the sprawling landscape, his mind heavy with the weight of the decisions that lay ahead. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow across the sky. It was a quiet, peaceful moment, a stark contrast to the chaos of the trial and the battles that had consumed him. For the first time in years, Musk allowed himself to think beyond business, beyond the next groundbreaking innovation. He thought about his family, about his children, and about the relationships that had been neglected. It was easy to become so consumed with work that everything else fell away. But he knew that now, more than ever, he needed balance. He needed to reconnect with the things that truly mattered. Musk picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in a long time. It was his brother, Kimball. They had always been close, but as Musk's fame and fortune had grown, so too had the distance between them. Kimball had always been there, offering support, but in recent years, even their conversations had become more distant. "Hey, Kimball. It's Elon." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and then Kimball's voice came through, full of warmth. "Elon. I didn't expect to hear from you. How's everything going?" Musk took a deep breath, his mind momentarily racing. He hadn't fully formulated what he wanted to say, but he knew it was time to start making changes. "I've been thinking a lot lately," Musk began. "About everything, my work, my family, the trial. I think it's time I stopped focusing so much on the future and started focusing more on the present. On the people who matter." There was a slight pause before Kimball spoke again. "I'm glad to hear that. You've been burning the candle at both ends for so long, man. We've all noticed it. But you've always been the one to push forward, so this is different. What's next for you?" Elon didn't have all the answers, but for the first time, he felt as though he might be on the right path. "I'm going to focus on getting things right. On making sure that I'm present in the moments that really count. I've spent so much time looking ahead that I've missed the things right in front of me. I've neglected relationships, and I've been so obsessed with change that I forgot the importance of connection." Kimball's voice softened. "You've always wanted to change the world, Elon. But it's good to hear that you're starting to realize that change begins at home. You're not alone in this, okay?" Elon's throat tightened at his brother's words. It had been a long time since he had allowed himself to be vulnerable, to admit that he wasn't invincible. That he didn't have all the answers. The legal battle had been a wake-up call, but now, he understood that the real work was internal. Rebuilding wasn't just about his companies, it was about himself. About who he was when the world wasn't watching. "I need to be better," Elon said quietly. "For myself, for my family, for the people who still believe in me. It's time to stop running from what matters most." Kimball sighed, the weight of his words settling between them. "We'll get through this. You'll get through this. Just take it one step at a time." Musk smiled, grateful for his brother's unwavering support. It wasn't going to be easy, but he knew that with people like Kimball by his side, he could find a way forward. Later that evening, Musk made another call. This time, it was to the CEO of Tesla, his trusted ally, and business partner. The conversation was about the company's future, about new innovations and strategies to keep Tesla at the forefront of the electric vehicle industry. But it was different than any conversation Musk had had before. This time, the focus wasn't just on expansion and profitability. It was about sustainability, about building a company that valued the people behind the machines. "I want to create something more than just technology," Musk said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "I want Tesla to be a company that has heart. That's driven by a purpose beyond profits. We've done amazing things, but it's time to shift the focus. It's time to rebuild the foundation." The CEO on the other end of the line paused, clearly surprised by Musk's words. "Elon, are you saying?" "Yes," Musk interjected. "I'm saying that we need to put people at the center of everything we do. It's not just about the tech anymore. It's about making sure we're doing the right thing, not just for the world, but for the people we serve." The conversation moved on, but Musk's mind was already racing ahead. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a father, a brother, a human being. And it was time to start living that way. The following weeks were a blur for Elon Musk. The decision to shift his focus from relentless innovation to a more balanced approach had ignited a new sense of purpose in him. But the road ahead was not as easy as he had hoped. Despite his desire to rebuild his life and career, the public and his business partners were watching closely. Every move he made felt like it was under a microscope, and with every new decision came both praise and skepticism. Musk knew that action spoke louder than words. If he was truly committed to change, he had to prove it. But even as he began implementing his new philosophy in his companies, he felt the weight of his past mistakes lingering over him, like a shadow he couldn't outrun. One of the first steps in his journey toward redemption was an unexpected meeting with a group of employees at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto. It wasn't scheduled, and it wasn't in any formal setting. Musk decided to go straight to the heart of his company, the people who made it all possible. He wanted to see their faces, hear their concerns, and feel the pulse of Tesla's inner workings. The meeting took place in one of Tesla's innovation labs, a place buzzing with activity, creativity, and the hum of machines. The employees looked up in surprise as Musk walked into the room, accompanied by his close aide, Sarah, who had been instrumental in organizing the impromptu visit. "Good afternoon, everyone," Musk said, his voice carrying a sincerity that was new to them. The employees, though used to his leadership, were taken aback by the shift in his tone. Musk was known for his intense work ethic, his obsession with pushing the boundaries of technology, and his often domineering presence. But today, he seemed different. More grounded, more aware. "I know I've been focused on the future of Tesla and the incredible innovations we can create. But I also realize that I've neglected the most important aspect of this company, the people who make it all happen. You. And I want to change that." There was a pause, and Musk could see the doubt in some of their eyes. It was hard to imagine the Elon Musk they had worked with for so long, driven, demanding, and always looking ahead, suddenly shifting gears. "I know I've made mistakes," Musk continued. "I've pushed everyone hard, including myself. And while that drive has led us to incredible success, I've come to realize that there's more to life than just reaching the next milestone. There's the journey, and the people who walk it with us. I've been too focused on the end goal and not enough on the people who make it possible." Sarah, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "Elon's right. We've been working on making Tesla not just a leader in innovation, but also a company that values every single person who contributes to its success. We've started implementing some new programs to support the well-being of our employees, and we want your feedback on what more we can do." One of the engineers raised his hand. "You're saying we're going to focus more on people than just the tech? I mean, that's a shift. How do you plan on balancing the two?" Musk nodded, acknowledging the question. "It's not an either-or situation. The tech is important, but so are the people who create it. We're going to find ways to do both. Innovation and employee well-being. We can't keep pushing people to the brink if we want to build something sustainable." The room was quiet as the employees absorbed Musk's words. For some, it was hard to believe that the CEO they had admired for his brilliance could suddenly take such a vulnerable approach. But there was something undeniably genuine about his commitment. For the first time in a long time, the atmosphere in the room felt more like a collaboration than a command. As the meeting ended, Musk shook hands with several employees, thanking them for their contributions. He left the room feeling a sense of relief, but also an overwhelming realization: this was just the beginning. If he was truly going to change, he needed to involve everyone in the process. He couldn't do it alone. In the weeks that followed, Musk spent more time with his employees, holding regular town halls, and making himself more accessible. He even took a step further, getting involved in the design process for some of Tesla's new projects, sitting down with the engineers and the designers to understand their challenges, their ideas, and their frustrations. He wasn't just the visionary anymore, he was an active participant in the journey. But while his efforts at Tesla were beginning to bear fruit, Musk knew that there was still a long way to go. The public still saw him as a controversial figure. The media continued to scrutinize his every move. There was no escaping the reality that his past would continue to haunt him. The trial had left a mark, and no matter how much he tried to change, people would always remember the man who had been so desperate to win, even if it meant losing sight of his own humanity. Musk had always been driven by a need to prove himself, to the world, to his employees, to his family. But now, he realized that the need to prove himself was no longer enough. The quest for redemption had to come from within. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Musk found himself alone in his office at SpaceX, looking out over the vast expanse of stars through the window. He had once dreamed of reaching the stars, of pushing the boundaries of space exploration. But tonight, his thoughts were grounded on Earth, on the people, the relationships, the legacy he would leave behind. He picked up his phone again and called his brother, Kimball. "I've been thinking," Musk said, his voice quieter than usual. "About everything. The companies, the trial, the changes I want to make. I don't know if I can ever undo the damage I've caused. But I want to keep moving forward. I want to be a better man, not just for Tesla or SpaceX, but for my kids, for the people who've been there for me." Kimball's voice was reassuring. "You don't have to do this alone, Elon. Change takes time. But I know you can do it." Musk felt a surge of gratitude. Maybe redemption wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about acknowledging it and doing the best he could from here on out. "I'll keep trying," Musk said, his tone firm. "One step at a time." And so, as he stared up at the stars that night, Musk understood that the road to redemption was never going to be easy. But it was his road to walk, and he would walk it with purpose. As Elon Musk continued his journey toward redemption, the world watched, scrutinizing his every move. Every change he made within his companies, every word he spoke, and every step toward reconnecting with his employees was closely monitored. For many, his actions seemed like a fleeting attempt to mend the damage, but for others, the transformation was real. Musk was now more than just the tech genius and the billionaire innovator. He was becoming a man searching for balance, a man looking to reconnect with the values that had always driven him in the first place. But no matter how much Musk worked behind the scenes to rebuild his life, the media wasn't ready to let him off the hook. Every attempt he made to soften his image or to engage with people on a more personal level was met with a mixture of skepticism and praise. Headlines seemed to alternate between "Elon Musk reconnects with his employees" and "Musk's attempt at redemption, is it too late?" For someone who had spent much of his career as an enigma, Musk now found himself at the center of public curiosity. He was more accessible than ever, attending events where he once might have sent a representative, participating in discussions about the future of technology, and even interacting with fans on social media. But no matter what he did, there was always a lingering question: could he truly change? Or was this just another phase in the endless cycle of Musk's public reinventions? One morning, as he was preparing for a high-profile panel discussion on the future of sustainable energy, Musk sat in his office, reviewing notes and speeches. His assistant knocked gently before entering. "Mr. Musk, there's someone here to see you," she said, her voice hesitant. Musk glanced up from the papers. "Who is it?" "It's Judge Elizabeth Hayes," she replied. Musk's brow furrowed at the mention of her name. Judge Hayes, the powerful female judge who had presided over his trial. He had not expected to see her again, let alone so soon. There had been no indication that she had any further interest in his affairs. Her presence now felt more like an unspoken challenge. "Send her in," Musk said, trying to mask his surprise. Moments later, Judge Elizabeth Hayes walked into his office, her presence as commanding as ever. She was tall, with sharp features and a no-nonsense demeanor that had captivated the courtroom during the trial. Her reputation as a fair but firm judge had earned her both admiration and fear. The press had referred to her as the Iron Lady of Justice, a nickname she had never seemed to embrace but had certainly earned. "Musk," she greeted him, her tone cool but not unfriendly. "I didn't expect you to be in this position so soon after the trial." Elon stood, offering a brief nod of acknowledgement. "Judge Hayes. I didn't expect to see you either. Is everything all right?" Hayes took a seat across from him, her posture straight and professional. "I've been following your progress. I must admit, your recent actions have intrigued me. But there's still a part of me that wonders, are you truly changing, or is this just another performance?" Musk felt the weight of her question. She wasn't offering praise or criticism, she was simply seeking the truth. The truth about him. "I'm trying to change," he said, his voice steady. "I know it's not going to be easy. But I've realized that it's not enough to keep focusing on the next big thing. I've spent so much of my life pushing for progress that I neglected the people who helped me get here. Now, I want to focus on the present, on relationships, and on making sure that the companies I've built are more than just technological powerhouses, they need to have heart. Hayes studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Heart. That's an interesting word coming from you, Musk. You've built empires, but you've always done it through innovation, through numbers, through sheer willpower. Heart has never seemed like part of the equation. Musk took a deep breath, knowing that what he said next would define the direction of this conversation. I understand your skepticism. I've been driven by ambition for so long that I lost sight of what truly matters. But I'm not just talking about my companies. I'm talking about myself. I've been selfish, I've been reckless, and I've hurt people in the process. I can't undo that. But I can do better moving forward. I want to be better. There was a long silence between them, the only sound the faint hum of the city beyond the window. Hayes leaned back in her chair, considering his words. Finally, she spoke. Do you think people will forgive you? She asked, her voice surprisingly soft. Musk met her gaze. I don't know. I can't control that. But I'm not doing this for forgiveness. I'm doing it because I need to change. Not for anyone else, but for myself. I've realized that success doesn't mean anything if you don't have peace of mind or the people who matter most to you. Hayes nodded slowly. Well, Musk, I'm not here to offer forgiveness. That's something you'll have to earn. But I'll tell you this, you've got a long road ahead. People are watching. Your every move will be scrutinized, and any mistake will be magnified. Redemption isn't just a process, it's a long, hard battle. And you'll have to fight it every day. Musk nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. It wasn't a comforting thought, but it was the truth. I understand, he replied. And I'm ready for it. Hayes stood, adjusting her jacket. Good. I don't expect you to be perfect, Musk. But I do expect you to keep your word. And I'll be watching. As she left his office, Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. Judge Hayes wasn't offering him a free pass. She was offering him a challenge to prove that he could truly change. Her words echoed in his mind as he turned back to the panel discussion he was preparing for. This was more than just a conversation about sustainable energy. It was about redemption, about proving to the world that he could be more than the sum of his past mistakes. Elon Musk's life had always been a series of high-profile challenges, creating innovative companies, facing public scrutiny, and battling both competitors and his own ambition. But now, as he navigated the fragile path to redemption, the most daunting challenge of all loomed before him, regaining trust. Trust, Musk realized, was not something that could be bought or engineered. It was earned, and often, it was broken beyond repair. While he had made progress within his companies and with some of his employees, the public perception of him was still mired in the controversies that had plagued his career. The media, eager to find fault, continued to focus on his past mistakes, overshadowing the efforts he was making to change. Musk was beginning to understand that his transformation, as meaningful as it might be on a personal level, would not matter unless he could convince others that he was truly different. The moment of truth came when he was invited to speak at a global summit on sustainable energy, a prestigious event that would place him in front of world leaders, industry experts, and millions of viewers. It was an opportunity to showcase his vision for the future, not just as the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, but as a man who had grown and learned from his past. The night before the summit, Elon sat in his hotel room, going over his speech. He was exhausted from the relentless media attention and the scrutiny that followed him everywhere, but he knew this speech was more than just a professional obligation, it was his chance to show the world that he was truly committed to something greater than himself. As he sat at the desk, the phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, his assistant and close confidant. Remember, Elon, it's not just about the ideas you're presenting. It's about who you are now. Be real. Elon stared at the message for a long moment. He had always been the visionary, the person who saw possibilities when others saw obstacles. But now, he realized that to truly connect with people, he needed to show vulnerability. He couldn't hide behind his achievements, his ambition, or his past. The world needed to see the man behind the persona. He put the phone down and took a deep breath, his mind racing. Tomorrow would be his moment. But what if the world didn't believe him? What if they saw through the facade? What if, despite everything, the damage was irreparable? The next day, as he stepped onto the stage, the weight of the moment settled over him. The bright lights of the summit hall beamed down on him as he looked out over a sea of faces, many of which were familiar, some of which held skepticism and judgment in their eyes. The world was watching, waiting to see if he would deliver. The microphone came to life, and Musk began speaking. His usual confident tone was replaced by something softer, more introspective. When I first entered the world of innovation, I was driven by a vision of progress, a vision to push humanity forward. But in my pursuit of that progress, I lost sight of the very people who made it all possible. I was consumed by the need to succeed, to achieve, to outpace the competition. But what I've come to understand is that success isn't just about reaching milestones. It's about the journey, the people we work with, the values we hold, and the impact we have on the world. He paused, looking around at the audience, searching for a reaction. I know I've made mistakes. I've hurt people, ignored their concerns, and lost sight of the bigger picture. But I'm here today to say that I'm not the same person I was before. I've learned, and I'm committed to being better, not just as a leader, but as a human being. The crowd was silent, hanging on to his words. Some seemed skeptical, others curious, but no one interrupted. I can't change the past, Musk continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. But I can change how I move forward. I'm committed to making Tesla and SpaceX not just symbols of innovation, but of integrity and responsibility. We are not just creating products, we are creating a future. And that future must be one where we prioritize people, not just profits. Musk's heart was racing as he spoke, but he knew he had to keep going. He couldn't stop now. The message had to be clear, this wasn't just another corporate speech. This was his heart laid bare before the world. I'm asking for your trust, he said, the weight of the words hanging in the air. But I know trust isn't something that's given freely. It's something that has to be earned, over time, through actions, through transparency, through honesty. I don't expect to earn it all at once. But I will work every day to prove that I am worthy of that trust. There was a moment of silence, and then the room erupted in applause. It was not the overwhelming, thunderous applause of someone who had just made a groundbreaking announcement. It was a more tentative, reserved response. But it was applause nonetheless. Musk stepped back from the microphone, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The first step had been taken, and it felt right. The road to redemption was long and fraught with obstacles, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was heading in the right direction. Backstage, Sarah greeted him with a cautious smile. That was real. Do you think it made an impact? Musk nodded, though his face was still serious. I don't know. But it had to be real. No more games. No more hiding. As they left the stage and made their way out of the building, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The world had seen a glimpse of the man he was trying to become, but that was just one moment in a long journey. He would have to work harder than ever to prove that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of self-awareness but the start of a new era for him and his companies. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk's speech at the Global Summit was met with mixed reactions, but for the first time in years, the world was beginning to look at him differently. Not as the erratic billionaire with questionable decisions, but as someone willing to acknowledge his mistakes and take steps toward genuine transformation. It was the beginning of a long, difficult road, but Musk was determined to stay on course. But as the dust began to settle from the summit, another surprise awaited him, a new potential alliance, one that could change the trajectory of his efforts to rebuild both his reputation and his company's. It came in the form of a meeting with Jessica Sinclair, a rising star in the world of business and politics. A former judge and highly respected legal advocate, Jessica had become known for championing causes related to corporate responsibility, ethical leadership, and environmental sustainability. She was a force to be reckoned with, and in many ways, she embodied the values Musk was now trying to embrace. Musk had been introduced to Jessica through an unlikely connection, Sarah, his assistant, who had been instrumental in helping him connect with the right people. Jessica had reached out to Musk after hearing his speech, intrigued by the new direction he seemed to be taking. She had done her research, and while she remained cautious, she believed there might be something real in Musk's recent efforts to change. The meeting was set for the following week, and Musk was preparing for what could be one of the most pivotal moments in his personal and professional life. The day of the meeting arrived, and Elon found himself pacing in his office, waiting for Jessica to arrive. He had always been a man who thrived under pressure, but this situation felt different. This wasn't just another business deal, this was a chance to forge a partnership with someone who shared his newfound values. If he could win Jessica's trust, it could open doors to new opportunities, ones that would align with his vision of creating a more responsible, sustainable future. When Jessica walked into his office, he was immediately struck by her presence. She was tall, composed, and exuded an air of authority. Her reputation as a fierce advocate for justice and ethical leadership had preceded her, but it was clear she wasn't interested in flattery. She was here to see if Musk was truly committed to the principles he had espoused in his speech. "Musk," she said, her voice firm yet warm. "I've been following your journey. And I have to admit, I'm intrigued. But I've also been in this business long enough to know that words are easy. Actions, however, are much harder to come by." Musk smiled, knowing she wasn't going to offer him an easy path. "I get it," he replied. "Words alone aren't enough. I know that. But I'm committed to showing through my actions that I'm serious about this new direction. I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to learn from them and do better. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem." Jessica studied him for a moment before responding. "All right. Then let's talk specifics. What is it that you want from me? And more importantly, what can you offer in return?" Musk leaned forward, his voice steady but earnest. "I've always believed that technology and innovation can change the world for the better. But I've realized that to truly make an impact, we need to do more than just push the boundaries of what's possible. We need to focus on sustainability, on people, on responsibility. I want to work with you to create a platform for businesses to operate ethically, with transparency and accountability. We need to redefine what success looks like in today's world, and that means balancing profit with social and environmental responsibility." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "And how do you plan on achieving that, exactly?" Musk's eyes sparkled with determination. "Through collaboration. We can't do this alone. We need to bring together the best minds in business, law, and politics to create a framework that encourages companies to prioritize long-term well-being over short-term gains. If we can make ethical leadership the standard, not the exception, we'll change the game. And I want you to be a part of that." Jessica was quiet for a moment, considering his words. Musk knew he had to prove to her that his vision wasn't just a lofty ideal, it had to be something tangible. "All right," she said, finally breaking the silence. "I'm willing to give you a chance. But understand this, I won't tolerate anything less than complete transparency. If we're going to do this, we do it the right way. No shortcuts. No backpedaling. Are you prepared for that?" Musk nodded without hesitation. "I am. This is about more than just my reputation. It's about creating something that lasts, something that can truly make a difference. And I know it's going to take time. But I'm ready. Jessica gave a small smile, a gesture that was rare for her, but it spoke volumes. It was a sign that she was cautiously optimistic, willing to trust Musk, at least for now. "We'll start small," she said. "But we'll make sure it's something real. You've got a lot of work ahead of you, Musk. But I'm willing to help you build a new path, if you're willing to walk it with integrity." As she stood up to leave, Musk felt a sense of relief. This wasn't a partnership that would be forged overnight, but it was the beginning of something important. Jessica Sinclair was not just another ally, she was someone who held the same values he was trying to adopt. Together, they could create a powerful force for change in the business world. As the door closed behind her, Musk sat back in his chair, deep in thought. For the first time in a long while, he felt like the future held more promise than the past had ever allowed. He wasn't just fighting for his companies anymore. He was fighting for something greater, a world where innovation and ethics could coexist. The road ahead was uncertain, and Musk knew there would be challenges. But he was ready for them. With Jessica's partnership, he was taking the first step toward redefining what it meant to be a leader in the modern world. Elon Musk's partnership with Jessica Sinclair was still in its infancy, but it already felt like a major turning point. What had started as a tentative conversation about ethical leadership had quickly evolved into a powerful collaboration. Together, they were laying the groundwork for something ambitious, a new platform that would challenge companies to prioritize social and environmental responsibility. But as they began to draft their plans, the reality of what they were trying to accomplish started to hit Musk harder than he had anticipated. This wasn't just another business venture, it was a movement. And the weight of that responsibility was beginning to take a toll. The work itself was exhilarating, Musk thrived when he was tackling big problems. But it was also grueling. They needed to build not just a business model but a new standard for an entire industry. And with every new idea came a new set of complications. Regulatory concerns. Financial risks. The skepticism of the business world. Musk found himself in countless meetings with legal experts, policymakers, and environmental advocates, trying to make sense of the complex systems that govern business practices in different countries. Each conversation seemed to bring more questions than answers, and Musk was beginning to feel like he was in over his head. One evening, after another long day of brainstorming and strategizing, Musk found himself sitting alone in his office, staring out the window at the city below. He had always been able to push through difficult times before, relying on his innate drive and determination. But now, as he gazed out at the sprawling metropolis, he wondered if that would be enough. Was he really ready to take on this kind of responsibility? Just then, his phone buzzed with a message from Jessica. "I think we need to talk. I'm worried about how much weight we're putting on this project. Are you okay?" Musk let out a deep sigh. Jessica had been right to ask. He wasn't okay. The pressure was mounting, and he could feel the walls closing in. He had made a commitment to change, to lead with integrity and responsibility. But the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. If they failed, the consequences wouldn't just affect his companies, they would affect the future of the entire industry. He quickly typed a response. "Let's meet. I need to talk through everything." An hour later, Jessica arrived at his office. She didn't waste time with pleasantries, immediately getting down to business. "Musk," she began, her tone direct, "I can see it in your face. You're burning out. This isn't just about building a new business model, it's about creating a movement. And that's not something you can do alone. It's not something anyone can do alone." Musk nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I've been thinking about that. I thought that if I could just push hard enough, work fast enough, I could make it all happen. But the deeper we get into this, the more I realize that I'm not sure I can carry it all on my own. The pressure is overwhelming." Jessica crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair, studying him carefully. "You need help. But you also need to be honest with yourself about what you can realistically achieve. This kind of change takes time. It takes collaboration. It takes more than just a vision, it takes a network of people who are willing to fight for the same cause. You've got to bring people in, Musk. You can't do it by yourself. The truth of her words resonated deeply with Musk. For years, he had been the sole driving force behind his companies. He had built Tesla and SpaceX by relying on his own instincts and vision. But now, he was facing something far greater than anything he had tackled before. He was trying to reshape an entire industry, and that was something he couldn't do alone. I've always been someone who believes in taking risks, Musk said, his voice quiet. But this feels different. What if I fail? What if I let down everyone who's counting on me? What if I don't have what it takes to lead this movement? Jessica's gaze softened. You don't have to do it alone. You've got people who believe in you. I believe in you. But you have to let go of the idea that you have to carry everything on your shoulders. You've got a team, a network, and allies who are ready to help you. But you've got to trust them. You've got to trust yourself enough to ask for help. Musk leaned back in his chair, considering her words. She was right. He had always been someone who trusted his own instincts above all else. But now, as the magnitude of what he was trying to achieve began to sink in, he realized that he couldn't do it alone, not this time. I've been so focused on proving myself, he said, his voice tinged with frustration. Proving that I can lead, that I can change. But maybe I've been focusing on the wrong thing. Maybe what I really need to do is learn how to lead with others, not just by myself. Jessica smiled, her expression one of approval. That's exactly what you need to do. Leadership isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about bringing people together, inspiring them to believe in your vision, and empowering them to help make it a reality. You can't be everything to everyone, Musk. But you can be the catalyst for a movement that's bigger than just you. Musk sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on what Jessica had said. He had always thought that leadership meant pushing forward relentlessly, never showing weakness or doubt. But now, he understood that true leadership meant acknowledging when he needed help, and being willing to accept it. Thank you, Jessica, he said finally, his voice quieter than usual. I think I'm starting to see things more clearly now. I've been so caught up in the idea of saving the world that I forgot what it really takes to build something lasting. I'm going to have to lean on others, trust them, and let them help guide this project forward. I can't do it all myself. Jessica nodded, her face a mixture of pride and understanding. You're on the right track, Musk. Now let's go build something that matters. As they left his office, Musk felt a sense of relief. The burden that had weighed so heavily on him seemed a little lighter now. He had a clearer vision of what he needed to do, not just push forward at all costs, but build a network of people who could help him achieve his goal. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in a while, Musk felt like he wasn't walking it alone. The progress Musk and Jessica had made in their collaboration was promising, but as with any ambitious venture, the true test was in the execution. They had spent months drafting plans, meeting with advisors, and outlining their vision for a new, responsible business model. But now, it was time to put their ideas into action. The first major step was to launch a pilot program, a test run of their new platform that would invite a select group of companies to join their initiative. The goal was to create a standard for ethical business practices, one that measured corporate responsibility in ways that went beyond the bottom line. It would include benchmarks for environmental sustainability, fair labor practices, and transparent governance. The companies that joined the platform would have to meet these standards in order to be recognized as part of the movement. Musk and Jessica knew that the success of this pilot program would determine whether they could move forward with their vision, or if it would all come crashing down. The stakes were high. The business world was skeptical of any initiative that didn't prioritize profit, and they knew they would be under intense scrutiny. On the morning of the launch, Elon sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen. His thoughts were racing. This was a crucial moment. If the pilot program was successful, it would open the door to bigger opportunities and more widespread adoption. But if it failed, it could be a huge setback, not just for him, but for the entire movement. Jessica walked into the room, her expression serious but focused. "Ready for today?" she asked. Musk looked up at her, trying to mask his anxiety. "I don't know. I think we've covered everything, but it still feels like we're walking into the unknown." Jessica smiled, a knowing smile. "You've been in the unknown before. And you've come out on top. This is just another challenge. But we're not alone in this. We've built something solid here. Trust in the process." Her words were comforting, but Musk couldn't shake the nervous energy that had settled in his stomach. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something bigger, a chance to change the way business was done on a global scale. And if this first test didn't work, it could set back everything they were working for. They were meeting with a small group of CEOs and executives from the companies that had agreed to join the pilot program. The room was sleek and modern, with glass walls that overlooked the city below. Musk and Jessica had carefully chosen these companies for their reputations, companies that were known for their commitment to innovation and progress. But even they were skeptical. Business leaders who had thrived on traditional models of growth and profit weren't eager to embrace a new way of doing things, especially when it meant giving up some control and profit. As the meeting began, Musk took a deep breath and addressed the room. "Thank you all for being here today. I know this isn't easy. You've all built successful businesses by focusing on the bottom line, on growth, on profits. But we're here to talk about something different. We're here to talk about the future. A future where business is about more than just making money. A future where companies are held accountable for their impact on the world, on the environment, on people, on communities. This isn't just a nice to have. This is the new way of doing business." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We're launching a pilot program today that will set a new standard. A standard for ethical business practices, for transparency, for sustainability. If we can do this, we'll prove that success doesn't have to come at the expense of everything else. We'll show the world that businesses can thrive while doing the right thing." There was a long silence in the room. Musk could feel the skepticism in the air. The executives exchanged glances, clearly uncertain about what to make of this bold new initiative. Jessica spoke next, her voice calm but firm. "I understand the risks. We all do. But we believe that this is the future. We believe that by joining this program, you can set the example for the rest of the world. We're not asking you to change everything overnight. But we are asking you to commit to a set of principles that will guide your company toward a more responsible way of doing business." Another silence followed. Musk could see that the room was still divided, some executives nodding thoughtfully, while others seemed hesitant, unwilling to take the plunge. Then, one of the CEOs, a woman in her early 50s who had built her company into a global powerhouse, spoke up. "This sounds good in theory," she said, her tone cautious, "but I don't see how it's sustainable in the real world. How do we balance ethical leadership with the need to stay competitive? How do we ensure that we're not sacrificing profits, especially when our investors expect results?" Musk leaned forward, answering with conviction. "That's exactly what we're trying to prove. It's not about choosing between profits and ethics. It's about rethinking what success really means. We believe that businesses that are committed to sustainability, to fairness, to accountability, those businesses will ultimately be more successful in the long run. They will attract the right kind of customers, investors, and employees. And in the end, that's the kind of success that matters." The CEO wasn't convinced, but another executive, a young man in his 30s who had started a tech company focused on renewable energy, spoke up. "I'm on board," he said. "I think this is the future. We've been focused on innovation for so long, but we haven't always considered the impact of what we're doing. I want my company to be part of something bigger. If we can set a new standard for ethical business, then I want to be on the front lines. Musk felt a small sense of relief. The tide was starting to turn. Jessica stepped forward, her voice steady. It's not going to be easy. We will face challenges, no doubt. But we are committed to supporting you through this process. Together, we can make this work. One by one, the CEOs and executives began to nod in agreement. It wasn't unanimous, but the room was slowly beginning to shift. Some were still unsure, but many seemed to recognize the potential of this new model. By the end of the meeting, Musk and Jessica had secured the participation of several key companies in the pilot program. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a start. As the executives filed out of the room, Musk turned to Jessica. "We did it," he said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "But it's just the beginning. The real work starts now." Jessica smiled. "It's only the beginning, Musk. But it's a big first step." The success of the pilot program was a relief to Musk and Jessica, but their celebration was short-lived. While some companies embraced the new ethical standards, others were less than thrilled. The media, too, began to pay attention, though not in the way they had hoped. Within days of the announcement, headlines began to pop up across major business publications, questioning the feasibility of Musk's vision. Critics from all corners of the corporate world were speaking out, warning that Musk's ethical business standards would ultimately hurt innovation and profits. Some argued that the business world wasn't ready for such a drastic shift, while others accused Musk of trying to impose his personal ideals on an industry that thrived on competition and the free market. One particular article in the Wall Street Journal set the tone for the backlash. It read, "Elon Musk's ethical business model, a risky gamble that could cripple innovation." The piece detailed concerns from top executives who believed that adopting these new ethical practices would force companies to cut costs, delay progress, and stifle competition. The author even quoted a number of well-known CEOs who criticized Musk for focusing too much on social issues and not enough on the bottom line. Jessica and Musk were inundated with calls from their partners and advisors. Some were supportive, but others voiced concerns. "Musk, we've been in this business for years. You're asking for too much too soon," one advisor said. "We knew it would be challenging, but this is starting to feel like a losing battle. Do you really think these companies are going to keep up?" Musk stared at the phone, rubbing his temples. He had expected some resistance, but the scale of the backlash was greater than he had anticipated. For the first time in a long while, doubt crept into his mind. Was he pushing too hard? Were his ideals going to get in the way of success? Jessica, ever the voice of reason, picked up the phone as well. "We knew this would happen," she said, taking charge of the situation. "The most difficult thing in business is changing the status quo. It's going to be hard, but that doesn't mean it's impossible." Musk nodded, but the weight of the situation felt heavier than ever. The pushback is coming from every direction. What if they're right? What if the world's not ready for a change like this? Jessica sighed, knowing how hard this was hitting him. "The world is never ready for change, Musk. But if we don't push for it, who will? We can't expect the whole world to jump on board overnight. It's going to take time, patience, and constant advocacy. That's how real change happens." But the skepticism was getting louder. A few days later, Musk found himself at a high-profile conference, addressing an audience of investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders. The event was supposed to be a showcase for his new initiative, but the pressure was already building. The weight of the backlash seemed to follow him, lurking in the shadows of every conversation and interaction. As Musk took the stage, he could feel the eyes of the room on him. The media, the critics, and even some of his own colleagues were waiting to see how he would respond to the controversy. He had always been confident in his ideas, but this was different. This wasn't just about launching another product or company, this was about changing the very way business was done. And not everyone was ready for that change. Musk cleared his throat and addressed the audience. I know many of you have questions about what we're trying to do with the new ethical business model. I know that there's skepticism. There's fear. There's resistance, he said, his voice calm but resolute. But let me be clear, this is not just a passing trend. This is not just some business strategy. This is the future. The companies that thrive in the years to come will be the ones who take responsibility for their impact on the world. The ones who understand that success is not just about making money, it's about making a difference. Musk paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. I've spent my entire career challenging the status quo, from electric cars to space travel. And I believe this is no different. There's no going back. The world is changing. Business practices must change with it. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But I believe it's worth it. The room was silent. Musk could sense that some were still skeptical, but there were others who seemed to be listening. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to see his vision. But Musk wasn't convinced. His words were powerful, but he knew they weren't enough to win over the critics. They needed results. They needed proof. Jessica, who had been sitting in the audience, stood up and joined Musk on stage. She turned to him, offering a reassuring smile before addressing the room. We've seen what happens when companies take responsibility for their actions, she said. We've seen how it can drive innovation, build trust with customers, and create long-term growth. This isn't just about doing the right thing. It's about building a better future for all of us. Musk glanced at her, grateful for her steady support. Together, they had a shared vision, and it was one that neither of them was willing to abandon, no matter how hard the fight became. After the speech, the reactions were mixed. Some investors approached Musk with renewed interest, eager to learn more about the ethical business model. Others remained skeptical, voicing concerns about the feasibility of his approach. And still, others were outright critical, dismissing the whole initiative as a dangerous gamble that would never succeed in the cutthroat world of business. Musk knew that they had just entered a battle that would not be won easily. The backlash was real, and it was only going to get worse before it got better. But Musk wasn't one to back down. He had built his empire by challenging the odds, by going against the grain. And this time, it would be no different. The backlash Musk and Jessica had been dealing with wasn't just coming from critics anymore, it was starting to come from within. The skeptics had now turned into vocal opponents, both in the business world and the media. For every CEO who expressed a desire to join their ethical business platform, there seemed to be two more questioning its viability. Investors were hesitant, and some even began pulling back their support. It was becoming clear that, for all the idealism they had, they needed to prove that ethical business practices could not only coexist with profitability but could actually drive growth. Musk knew that theory and speeches wouldn't cut it anymore. He needed something concrete, something that would silence the critics once and for all. I think it's time we show the world that this can work, Jessica, Musk said one evening, as he stood on the balcony of his office, overlooking the sprawling city below. We need a case study, an example of a company that's turned its business around by adopting these principles. We need proof. Jessica stood beside him, arms crossed, taking in his words. You're right. But finding the right company will be challenging. Most businesses are already committed to their existing models. They're not going to jump ship just because we say they should. Musk nodded. It's not about just getting any company on board. It's about finding a company that's struggling, one that needs a change but doesn't know how to make it happen. If we can help them turn things around with our model, then we'll have the proof we need. The next few days were filled with meetings and brainstorming sessions. They needed to find the right candidate, a company that was in trouble but had the potential to benefit from ethical business practices. The challenge was finding one that would be willing to embrace the shift, and that had enough visibility for their success to make an impact. Eventually, they found what they were looking for, a mid-sized apparel company called Brighter Threads. The company had been hit hard by recent scandals involving labor violations and environmental damage. Their reputation was in tatters, and they were losing customers and investors at an alarming rate. But they had a history of innovation, and Musk saw potential. He and Jessica met with Brighter Thread's CEO, a man named Mark Johnson, in his modest office on the outskirts of the city. Mark was a middle-aged man with graying hair and a weary look in his eyes. It was clear that his company was on the brink of collapse, but he was also a man who knew that change was needed. The question was whether he was ready to make that change. "I know our company is in trouble," Mark admitted, his voice rough. "We've made mistakes, big ones. The labor violations, the pollution, the consumer backlash, it's been a nightmare. But I don't know if this ethical business model is the solution. It feels like a risk we can't afford to take." Musk leaned forward, speaking with calm determination. "Mark, the risk you're facing right now is not in adopting this new model. The risk is continuing down the path you're on. You're losing customers, investors, and credibility. If you don't change, your company could be gone in a matter of years. But if you take this step, if you embrace ethical practices and make sustainability a core part of your business, you could turn everything around. Your customers will come back. Investors will notice. And most importantly, you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing." Jessica added, "You're not alone in this. We've already seen companies who've made this shift and come out stronger for it. We have the framework, the support, and the tools to help you transform. But it's up to you whether you want to take the first step." Mark looked between them, clearly torn. His company was in a precarious position, but the idea of adopting an entirely new business model seemed daunting. Still, the appeal of a second chance was hard to ignore. "If we do this, if we try it, what's the first step?" Mark asked quietly. Musk smiled. "The first step is a commitment. A commitment to change, not just in how you operate, but in how you think about business. We'll help you develop a roadmap, set new standards for sustainability in labor rights, and make transparency a core part of your brand. We'll also help you communicate the changes to your customers and investors, showing them that Brighter Threads is ready for the future." Mark hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Let's do it. If there's a chance this could work, I'm willing to try." The following weeks were a whirlwind. Musk and Jessica worked with Brighter Threads to implement the new business practices. They overhauled the company's supply chain, ensuring that all materials were sustainably sourced. They partnered with organizations that promoted fair labor practices and worked to improve conditions in the factories that produced Brighter Threads clothing. They also launched a new marketing campaign focused on the company's commitment to ethical business, hoping to win back the trust of consumers. Musk and Jessica knew that this was their moment. If Brighter Threads could turn its fortunes around, it would be proof that the ethical business model wasn't just an ideal, it was a viable, profitable approach. But they also knew the road wouldn't be easy. The transformation was going to be difficult, and the world would be watching. Then, just as they were beginning to see some early signs of progress, a new challenge arose. A rival company, one that had been quick to criticize Musk's approach, launched an aggressive campaign against Brighter Threads, attempting to discredit their efforts and sow doubt about the viability of ethical business practices. The battle was just beginning. Musk, Jessica, and Mark knew that they would have to fight not just for Brighter Threads, but for the future of responsible business itself. As Brighter Threads moved forward with its transformation under Musk and Jessica's guidance, the first signs of success were starting to show. The new sustainable materials were being sourced, the working conditions in the factories were improving, and consumer interest was slowly but steadily growing. Sales were creeping upward, and customer feedback on the changes was more positive than negative. It was clear that they had found a foundation, but the path ahead was still fraught with challenges. However, just as things seemed to be gaining traction, a new adversary emerged, the competitor they had been expecting, but perhaps not quite in the way they had imagined. A major fashion conglomerate, Globalware, one of Brighter Thread's largest competitors, launched a full-scale marketing campaign to discredit the ethical model Musk and Jessica had been advocating for. The campaign, titled "The Real Cost of Doing the Right Thing," sought to highlight the potential negative impacts of switching to ethical business practices, particularly the costs that would ultimately be passed on to the consumer. The ad featured scenes of empty store shelves, with headlines proclaiming, "The cost of ethical fashion, prices through the roof." It showcased a family struggling to afford their groceries while wearing high-priced sustainable clothing, subtly blaming Brighter Threads and other brands that had taken a similar approach for the rising costs of everyday goods. The campaign hit hard. Customers, already feeling the strain of inflation and rising costs of living, began to question whether they could truly afford the higher prices that came with sustainable goods. Many had already been skeptical of the high-priced tags on ethical brands, and now Globalware had amplified those fears. Musk's phone rang non-stop in the days following the launch. He and Jessica were under siege from their investors, their partners, and their customers. "This is bad," Elon, one of his investors, said. "The backlash is growing. People are scared they won't be able to afford these clothes. You need to do something." Musk felt the pressure mounting, but there was something in his gut that told him to stay the course. Giving up now would mean letting Globalware dictate the terms of the ethical business model, and that was something he refused to do. "We've been in worse situations," Musk said to Jessica one evening as they met in his office, staring out at the city lights. "Remember when we were told the Tesla car would never work? Or when we were laughed at for trying to send a rocket into space? This isn't the first time we've been told that our ideas were too radical." Jessica nodded, her determination unwavering. "You're right. We've faced criticism before. But this is different. They're playing dirty, Musk. They're preying on people's fears. And we need to show them that they're wrong." Musk stood up, pacing the room as he formulated a plan. "We're going to have to fight fire with fire. We're not just going to sit back and let them manipulate the narrative. We need to make our case, and we need to make it now." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" "We need to bring in some real numbers," Musk said, his eyes lighting up with a spark of determination. "Let's show the world what Globalware isn't telling them. Let's expose the truth behind their claims. Let's bring in experts, economists, and people who have done the research. We can prove that ethical business practices are not only sustainable, they're better for long-term growth." They decided to launch their own campaign, but with a twist. Instead of focusing on how their approach was better for the planet, they would emphasize how it was better for the consumer in the long run. They would show that higher initial costs would be offset by better quality, longer-lasting products, and the ripple effect of ethical choices on communities, job growth, and the environment. The campaign, titled "Better for the Future, Better for You," was designed to target not just the consumers who cared about sustainability, but those who hadn't yet been convinced that ethical business practices could benefit them personally. Musk and Jessica worked quickly, recruiting a team of experts from various fields, sustainability advocates, economists, and even former employees of Globalware who had first-hand knowledge of the company's behind-the-scenes practices. They gathered statistics on the true costs of fast fashion, human rights violations, environmental degradation, and the wastefulness of mass production, and compared those to the long-term benefits of ethical fashion. They also reached out to influencers and activists who had been outspoken about the impact of consumerism on the planet. These individuals, along with some former Globalware customers who had felt betrayed by the company's practices, shared their personal stories, illustrating the very real impact of unethical business practices on people's lives. The centerpiece of the campaign was a video that contrasted the lavish advertisements from Globalware with real-world footage of workers in poor conditions, the environmental damage caused by unsustainable practices, and the future risks of continuing down that path. The message was clear: you can't afford not to care. When the campaign launched, it immediately made waves. Social media exploded with discussions about the ethics of fashion, and the hashtag #BetterForYou started trending. There was a palpable shift in sentiment. Musk and Jessica had successfully reframed the conversation, challenging globalware's narrative and highlighting the hidden costs of ignoring ethical practices. But the fight wasn't over. Globalware didn't take the attack lying down. They responded with even more aggressive ads, accusing Musk of misleading the public and questioning his integrity. They dug into his past, bringing up controversies and legal battles, trying to paint him as a self-serving billionaire out of touch with the struggles of everyday people. The battle between Musk's vision for ethical business and the traditional model of profits over principles had become a full-scale war. But Musk, energized by the challenge, knew they had a chance to win. He wasn't just fighting for brighter threads, he was fighting for a world that could one day prioritize people and the planet over profits. As the war of words raged on, Musk and Jessica could feel the tide beginning to turn in their favor. The public's growing awareness of the damage caused by unethical business practices was leading to a tipping point. More people were demanding change, and the ethical business model was gaining traction, slowly but surely. The fight for credibility had only just begun, but Musk was more determined than ever to prove that doing the right thing was not just possible, it was profitable. As the battle between Musk's ethical business model and the traditional corporate giants raged on, the stakes grew higher. The campaign against globalware was not just about winning the public's favor, it was about reshaping the entire narrative around business, profits, and ethics. Musk and Jessica had put their reputation, their companies, and their vision on the line, and they knew there was no turning back. Despite the backlash, something remarkable began to happen. The public, inspired by Musk's willingness to confront the status quo, started to rally behind the message. Social media buzzed with support from grassroots activists, environmental groups, and even some influencers who had once been skeptical of Musk's methods. The conversation was no longer just about the cost of sustainable products, it was about what the future would look like if businesses didn't change. But there was another side to the equation that couldn't be ignored, the financial reality. While Musk and Jessica had made significant strides in changing minds, the business model itself was still being tested in the real world. Higher production costs meant that products made under ethical conditions were often priced higher than their mass-produced counterparts. And while sales were rising, they were still not enough to offset the immense pressures from the industry and investors. In meetings with his board, Musk could sense the mounting frustration. "We've got a great campaign, we've got public support, but we're not seeing the kind of growth we need. We can't keep this up forever if we don't start seeing more profit." Jessica, who had been a driving force behind the campaign, knew the truth of Musk's words. "We're doing what we can, Elon. The market is shifting, but it's going to take time. People are starting to recognize that ethical business isn't just a trend, it's the future. But we're caught in a transitional period, and that's a tough place to be." Musk rubbed his temples, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. "I know. But it's a catch-22. We need to show that this works, and we need to do it fast. The longer we take, the more we risk losing momentum." Just as he finished speaking, a message from Jessica's phone flashed up on the screen. It was a report about Brighter Thread's performance, a detailed analysis showing a slight uptick in sales but a sharp decline in profitability. "We can't keep running in the red like this," Musk muttered. "If we don't find a way to make this model profitable, we might lose it all." Jessica stood up, her expression thoughtful. "What if we flipped the narrative again? What if we made the case that businesses need to evolve and invest in long-term solutions, solutions that create value for both people and the planet? We could focus more on the bigger picture, not just the immediate cost." Musk looked at her, considering the idea. "You're suggesting we take a hit now for the greater good in the future? It's a risk, but we can build a better framework for growth down the line. Right now, we need to get more businesses on board, show them that their investments won't just be financially sound, but sustainable in the long term. We need to demonstrate that ethics don't just make the world better, they make business better too." Musk nodded, slowly piecing the strategy together in his mind. "Okay. Let's do it. We focus on the long game. But we also need to figure out a way to ease the financial burden on our partners. We need more investors who believe in the vision. We need to show them that their money won't just be spent, it will be part of a larger shift that will reshape the economy. Jessica smiled. That's the spirit. I think we've got a few companies in mind who could be the perfect partners. Over the next few weeks, Musk and Jessica worked tirelessly to reshape their approach. They reached out to more investors, particularly those who had an interest in environmental sustainability, and began working with other businesses to expand their model. The key was not just to promote the ethical business model but to prove that it could be integrated into various sectors without sacrificing profits. Meanwhile, Brighter Threads continued to improve its product lines, sourcing even more sustainable materials, cutting waste, and improving production processes. Every move was carefully calculated to demonstrate that doing the right thing didn't have to be a sacrifice. The company was beginning to prove its worth in the market, though the margins were still tight. In the midst of all this, Globalware was ramping up its own tactics. Their latest campaign was their most aggressive yet, releasing a series of ads mocking Musk's vision and the supposed failure of Brighter Threads to deliver on its promises. The attacks focused on the perceived hypocrisy of Musk's stance, claiming that, despite all his talk of ethics, he was still profiting from a system that could never truly be ethical. The ads hit hard. Some even claimed that Musk had sold out his own principles in pursuit of wealth. The media quickly picked up on this angle, and soon, the story became not just about business practices but about Musk himself. Was he really the visionary entrepreneur he claimed to be, or was he just another billionaire trying to cash in on the latest trend? Musk was facing his toughest challenge yet. The attacks on his character began to erode some of the trust he had built. While his supporters remained loyal, the public perception was starting to tilt, and the pressure was mounting from both inside and outside his company. One evening, Jessica sat across from Musk, her expression serious. "We can't let them tear us down. We need to do something bold. Something that will shock them." Musk's eyes met hers, a spark of determination returning to his gaze. "I know exactly what we need to do." The following day, Musk took to social media, addressing the public directly with a video message. "Globalware and others want you to believe that we're a threat to your way of life, that doing business ethically means paying higher prices and sacrificing convenience. But let me tell you something, it's not just possible to do good, it's the future of business. And I'm here to prove it." He continued, outlining a plan to introduce a new set of partnerships with global companies who were ready to adopt sustainable practices. This new initiative would create a collaborative, long-term model that integrated sustainability without raising costs. Musk was willing to partner with companies large and small to create a collective impact. The message was bold, unapologetic, and forward-thinking. It wasn't just a defense, it was a declaration. As the months went by, the fight for the future of Brighter Threads grew fiercer, and the stakes had never been higher. Musk's bold public declaration had set the stage for a new round of competition, but the pressure was taking its toll. Though the company was experiencing modest growth, the financial situation was becoming increasingly precarious. The public support was divided, with some applauding Musk's commitment to ethical practices, while others remained skeptical about whether these ideals could be realistically sustained in the cutthroat world of business. The new initiative Musk had launched, a collaboration with various companies committed to sustainable and ethical practices, was starting to bear fruit. Several large businesses had agreed to join the movement, pledging to adopt sustainable practices in their own supply chains. While this was a step in the right direction, it was still uncertain whether the initiative would be enough to shift the broader market. In the meantime, Globalware wasn't letting up. The corporation had continued to hammer Musk with new rounds of media attacks, casting doubt on Brighter Threads' future and undermining the public's confidence in Musk's claims of long-term profitability. "If Musk can't make a sustainable model work in his own company, what makes you think anyone can?" one of their ads stated, echoing sentiments that were beginning to grow in the media. It was clear that Globalware was playing the long game, focusing on psychological warfare. They were trying to make consumers question the very notion that ethics and profits could coexist. In their latest campaign, Globalware's CEO, a charismatic and seasoned businessman named Richard Vaughan, went on record stating, "Elon Musk might be a visionary, but not every vision is practical." His latest venture is a case study in what happens when you choose ideals over results. It was a moment that cut deep. Musk, known for his bold and often controversial public persona, was used to criticism, but this was different. This wasn't just a critique of his business, it was an attack on the very ideals he had spent years cultivating. For the first time, Musk began to question whether his determination to do things differently had put everything he cared about at risk. Late one night, in the midst of a particularly difficult week, Musk sat alone in his office, staring at the numbers on the screen. Sales were sluggish, investments were tight, and the constant media onslaught had made it nearly impossible to focus on anything but survival. The weight of the situation felt unbearable. Jessica had tried to reassure him, but even she knew the time had come for a final push. "Elon," Jessica said as she entered the office, a look of determination on her face. "We've got one shot left to make this work." Musk looked up at her, his face showing the exhaustion of the past few months. "I know. But I don't know if this is sustainable anymore. What if we're just deluding ourselves? Maybe they're right. Maybe we're trying to change a system that can't be changed." Jessica sat across from him, her eyes steady. "I know it's tough, but we've come too far to turn back now. Look at the progress we've made. We're changing people's minds. We're changing industries. Yes, it's hard. But doing the right thing always is." Musk ran a hand through his hair, deep in thought. "And what if we fail? What happens to everything we've built?" "The world doesn't change overnight," Jessica said, her voice calm but resolute. "But we can't stop trying. We've been through worse. And every time, we've come out on top. This is just another test of whether we truly believe in what we're doing." Her words struck a chord in Musk. He knew that Jessica was right. Success had never come easily to him. He had fought against the odds in the electric car industry, in space exploration, and in countless other ventures. Why should this be any different? He took a deep breath, steeling himself. "Okay, let's make this final push. Let's show the world that we can succeed, and we'll do it on our own terms." The next day, Musk gathered his team for an emergency meeting. He knew this was the moment that would determine the future of Brighter Threads and the success of the ethical business model. If they were going to make a final stand, they needed to go all in. "We've got to make a statement," Musk said, pacing the room. "We need to get the world's attention in a way that Globalware can't ignore. And we're going to do it with one thing, our product." He outlined a bold new initiative. Brighter Threads would introduce a new, revolutionary line of clothing that would be the pinnacle of ethical fashion. The new line would feature cutting-edge sustainable materials, produced with minimal environmental impact, and sold at a competitive price point. Musk was determined to prove that ethical fashion didn't have to be expensive, that consumers didn't have to choose between quality and sustainability. The new product launch would be a high-profile event, complete with a live-streamed fashion show, featuring celebrities and influencers who had championed sustainable living. Musk wanted to create a spectacle, something that would make waves across the industry and beyond. "This is our shot," Musk said. "We've got one chance to prove that doing the right thing doesn't just make the world better, it makes business better. Let's do it." The team rallied behind the idea. They worked around the clock to put together the launch, pulling together every resource they had to ensure that the product was ready for its debut. They reached out to their network of supporters, influencers, and investors, who were eager to see the line come to life. As the day of the launch approached, the pressure mounted. Musk had never faced a challenge like this before. The eyes of the world were on him, and the risk of failure had never been greater. He knew that if the launch didn't succeed, it could be the end of Brighter Threads, and with it, his dream of a more sustainable future for business. On the night of the launch, Musk stood backstage, watching as the final preparations were made. He was nervous, but his resolve was unwavering. This wasn't just about one company, it was about proving that ethical business could work on a global scale. The lights dimmed, the music swelled, and the fashion show began. The atmosphere was electric, buzzing with anticipation. The venue for the Brighter Threads launch was filled with influencers, media personalities, environmental advocates, and the fashion industry's biggest names. Musk and Jessica stood backstage, overseeing the final details, their nerves palpable despite their best efforts to appear calm. This wasn't just another product launch. This was the culmination of everything they had fought for, everything they believed in. The eyes of the world were upon them, and they could feel the weight of their vision pressing down on them like a physical force. As the lights dimmed and the first model stepped onto the runway, a hush fell over the crowd. The sustainable garments shimmered under the spotlight, cutting-edge, beautifully designed pieces that didn't just look good, but felt good to wear. These clothes weren't just eco-friendly, they were the future of fashion. The energy in the room shifted from curiosity to awe, as the crowd began to grasp the significance of what they were witnessing. The models walked confidently, each showcasing the innovative designs made from biodegradable fabrics, recycled materials, and organic cotton. Musk watched from backstage, his heart racing. He couldn't afford to look away, not now, not when everything was riding on this moment. "Is it working?" Jessica whispered, her eyes fixed on the runway. "It's too early to tell," Musk responded, his voice steady but his mind racing with doubt. "But we're on the right track. This has to work." As the final model made her way down the runway, the crowd erupted into applause. The entire event had been a spectacle, and the show was an undeniable success. The buzz was electric. Social media was already alight with people posting about the new line, with hashtags like #BrighterThreads and #EthicalFashion trending worldwide. It wasn't just the clothes that impressed people, it was the message behind them. The fashion show had not only showcased a revolutionary product but had also demonstrated that fashion could be both beautiful and sustainable. For the first time, it felt like the world was ready for change. However, despite the overwhelming positive response, the launch was just the first step. The hard work had only just begun. The media was already starting to focus on the bigger questions: could Brighter Thread scale its operations without sacrificing its principles? Could it compete with the established giants of the industry? Musk knew that the real test was yet to come. The excitement around the show would fade quickly unless they could convert that energy into tangible results. They needed more than just support, they needed investment, partnerships, and ultimately, market dominance. The following morning, Musk and Jessica met with a group of investors who had been watching the launch carefully. These investors had been hesitant to commit to Brighter Threads, unsure whether Musk's vision could turn a profit in the competitive world of fashion. They had been waiting for this moment, the moment when Musk proved that the ethical model could work on a large scale. In the boardroom, Musk sat at the head of the table, facing a panel of skeptical investors. Jessica was by his side, her expression one of quiet confidence. The room was filled with tension as the investors wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. "Mr. Musk," one of the investors began, "the fashion industry is notoriously difficult to break into, especially with a model like yours. You're asking us to invest in something that's fundamentally different from the way things have been done for decades. Can you show us that this is more than just a fad?" Musk leaned forward, his eyes steely with determination. "I'm not asking you to take a risk on a fad. I'm asking you to invest in the future of business. We've built a product that's already changing the conversation. We're proving that business can be both ethical and profitable. We've already seen the demand. The world is shifting, and those who adapt will be the ones who thrive." Another investor, a woman in her late 40s, nodded thoughtfully. "I understand your passion, Elon. But passion doesn't pay the bills. You say you have demand, but can you scale this operation? Can you meet the needs of the broader market while maintaining your ethical standards? Can you make this a sustainable business in the long term? Musk didn't hesitate. Yes, we can. The beauty of what we've created is that it's not just a product, it's a new way of thinking about business. Our model is designed to be scalable. We've already established partnerships with companies that share our values. The market is ripe for disruption, and we're ready to lead the charge. Jessica added, our sustainable production methods can be implemented across multiple industries. This isn't just about fashion, it's about creating a movement that will impact supply chains across the globe. We're not just making clothes, we're reshaping the future of commerce. The investors exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the conviction in both Musk and Jessica's voices. One of the investors, a man known for his strategic acumen, spoke up. I believe in the vision. But there's still the issue of profitability. How will you ensure that these higher production costs won't sink you in the long term? Musk smiled, leaning back in his chair. We're already seeing efficiencies in our production processes. As we scale, those costs will continue to decrease. Plus, we're working with our partners to share resources and reduce waste. We'll achieve profitability, but it will be a sustainable kind of profitability, one that doesn't rely on exploiting people or the planet. Jessica looked around the room. I'll be honest, it's not going to be easy. We'll face challenges, especially from the likes of global wear. But we're committed to doing this the right way. And we have the public behind us. The world wants to see change, and we're the ones who can deliver it. The weight of their decision settled in the room. Musk and Jessica shared a look, the relief evident in their eyes. The battle wasn't over, but they had taken a huge step forward. The sun set over the city, casting long shadows across the towering skyscrapers. Brighter Thread's headquarters buzzed with activity as the company prepared for what was likely the most critical week of its existence. Musk paced back and forth in his office, his mind racing with possibilities and uncertainties. This was it, the culmination of everything he had fought for. The fashion industry had taken notice, but now the real challenge was proving that his vision for a sustainable, ethical model could be sustained, even in the face of fierce competition. Global Wear, still reeling from the success of Brighter Thread's product launch, had launched their own counter-campaign, a slick, high-budget production that painted Musk's company as an idealistic experiment that could never succeed in the real world. They mocked his bold claims of a sustainable future, suggesting that Musk was no more than a dreamer who didn't understand the brutal realities of business. Despite the setback, Musk had never been more determined. The media may have been skeptical, the financial risks may have been enormous, but he had one thing that Global Wear couldn't replicate, the drive to make a difference, no matter what. And with the new product line now on store shelves and the global market watching, Musk knew it was time to finally prove himself. The week leading up to the pivotal meeting with the board of investors was filled with tension. The investors were eager for results, but so were the critics, who had been waiting for the company to stumble. The spotlight was intense. Every day, Musk faced mounting pressure. Reports were flooding in from all corners of the globe, positive reviews from some, but lingering doubts from others. Would the company survive the relentless tide of opposition, or would Brighter Threads be another failed experiment in Musk's long line of ambitious ventures? Despite the challenges, there was one piece of good news: Global Wear had underestimated the reach of Brighter Threads' marketing campaign. The company's online presence had exploded. Influencers, celebrities, and consumers who had long been loyal to fast fashion were beginning to question their choices. They wanted more sustainable alternatives. They wanted to be part of something that mattered. Jessica stood at Musk's side, as they reviewed the final presentation for the board meeting. They had put everything on the line, and now it was time to deliver. Elon, she said, her voice low but confident, we've made it this far, but this is the moment that will determine everything. You've always said that failure wasn't an option. We can't back down now. Musk met her gaze. I know. It's all or nothing. The boardroom was silent when Musk and Jessica entered, the tension palpable. The investors, now fully aware of the stakes, sat in their seats with their arms crossed, waiting for Musk to make his case. This wasn't just about numbers anymore, it was about legacy. They had already pledged their support, but they wanted assurance that this wouldn't be another failed venture in Musk's long list of ambitious dreams. Musk took a deep breath before speaking. I don't need to tell you that this is a critical moment. What I will tell you is this: we've made more progress than anyone thought possible. Our new product line has resonated with the public, and the market is demanding sustainable options. The question is not whether this will work, it's whether the industry can adapt quickly enough to meet the shift. The lead investor raised an eyebrow. And what about Globalware? They're pushing back hard. Can you really hold your ground against a company that has such vast resources? Musk's eyes hardened. Globalware may have resources, but they lack something we have: integrity. People are ready for change. We've already seen a shift in consumer behavior. We have the chance to show the world that business doesn't have to come at the expense of ethics. But it's going to take more than just a good product. We need to challenge the very core of how this industry operates. We need to keep pushing, no matter what. Jessica chimed in, her voice steady. Our success isn't just about what we sell, it's about the message we're sending. This is bigger than fashion. It's about creating a world where businesses can thrive without destroying the planet. The long-term vision is there. And the consumers are with us. For a moment, the room fell silent. The investors exchanged glances, and Musk could feel the weight of the moment. His entire future hinged on these next few minutes. Finally, one of the investors spoke. All right, Elon. You've got our attention. But you need to show us more than just passion. How are you going to ensure this company stays afloat in the long term? What's your plan to stay competitive with industry giants like Globalware? Musk leaned forward, his voice resolute. We will innovate faster than anyone else. We'll continue to invest in sustainable technologies that will allow us to scale without compromising our values. We're going to stay ahead of the curve, building partnerships with like-minded companies. And we'll keep expanding our market reach, ensuring that we're not just another fad, we're the future of business. I've never been one to back down from a challenge, and I don't plan to start now. Jessica added, this is the time for bold moves. If we don't push the envelope now, we'll be swallowed up by the competition. But if we stay true to our principles and keep pushing forward, there's nothing that can stop us. The investors sat back, considering the weight of what had been said. It was clear that Musk was fully committed to his vision, and his passion was contagious. Still, they needed concrete results. After a few moments of tense silence, the lead investor nodded. You've got the backing you need, Elon. But it's up to you to make this work. Deliver results, and the world will be at your feet. The relief that washed over Musk was palpable. He exchanged a look with Jessica, both of them understanding the magnitude of what they had just achieved. The next few months would be crucial. They had one last chance to prove that their model could succeed in the cutthroat world of fashion. As they left the boardroom, Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. The war wasn't over, but they had just won a decisive battle. Globalware would continue to fight, but Brighter Threads was no longer a small player. It was a movement, a force that was changing the world, one thread at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?